Hi, welcome to Fiber Chats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiber Chats. Welcome to my channel. Love having you here. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And my guest today is Scott Strong Wallace. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
Well, I actually follow your journey for quite a while. So it started basically before you even became an indie dyer. So I actually remember your first dyeing experience because you went on YouTube with that, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
were-
I started doing that early on last year. Not very shortly after I started my YouTube channel, I started also sharing sort of some of my dyeing journey.
right. So how was that first dyeing experience?
Um, Actually, I had done a little bit of dyeing with food color with Kool-Aid basically several years ago, and I don't know, I liked it. It was kind of fun, but I didn't really think about it. And then I in at the end of 2019, I subscribed to Knit Crate. No affiliation. I just subscribed to them, and then that was in December. So then I got a couple months, and then the COVID pandemic hit, and then all the shipping issues that they started having started to kick in. And so for the month of May in 2020, they didn't have any yarn that was going to be coming in for them to distribute. So they completely changed up what they were going to do, and they partnered with Rebecca Brown of ChemKnits on YouTube, who does a lot of dyeing tutorial videos.
Right.
And they partnered with her to create a kit that would go out with some Kool-Aid, some bear yarn, and then her instructional videos on how to use it. And at first I was like, oh man, what a waste of time. I'm not going to buy that one. I'm just going to, pause and go to the next month. But then I started watching her videos, and I was like, that looks like too much fun. I'm going to do this. And then that's this yarn that I made this out of. That's where it came from.
Can we
And
see
so
that a little bit wider?
I got completely hooked.
I love those colors.
I got completely hooked with it. So
So like, okay, the first time you're trying it, did you have like certain expectation in mind of what that color is supposed to look like after you're done with it?
not with that one. With that one, I was just like, okay, some of the techniques that she had used, I was like, okay, I want to try that. I want to see what comes of that. And I just really loved having that experience and seeing it actually, seeing it work and seeing the play of the colors that were that came about without intention. Um, and that's what I thought was a lot of fun, is that this beauty coming from just letting the color happen the way it wants to. And I found that fascinating, that it just came out to be something quite lovely and something quite unique that you can't get anywhere else.
So, okay, so that's the first time you're just playing with Kool-Aid. You got couple skeins. Then what? Like, how do you go from that to organizing a business?
Um, well, I okay, so during COVID, I was unemployed, which had happened right as COVID started. I got laid off from my job. Luckily, I had a decent severance from that job because I'd worked there for over 20 years. So, I had enough that basically kept me through the rest of the year. So I was job searching, and of course, jobs were really kind of hard to get during COVID. Um, and one of the things, my main profession is corporate training. So I'm used to being in front of groups of people and working with people to show them how to do things. And so part of that is why I started my YouTube channel, was to sort of have that interaction and keep that skill honed of communicating with people. And then part of that, and then when I started getting into dyeing, I was like, oh, it's kind of fun. Rebecca Brown does all her videos. Maybe I'll do some too, because maybe I'll reach people that she doesn't, and interest them in the process as well. And so I started doing that. I started using, again, more food coloring because I didn't want to invest a lot of money up front at that point because I wasn't employed. I could spend the money, but nothing else was coming in.
Right.
So I just continued to dye. I bought some packs of bare yarn from a supplier that provided really inexpensive bare yarn. So that's I just kind of would dye a couple skeins here or there, so I could just continually do that and kept practicing.
Then you did that all for yourself. Like, it wasn't at that point, you didn't have any thought of selling it.
No, yeah, this was just for me. And another reason I kind of started that was I had an impetus of moving from big box store acrylic yarns to do all of my work to moving into more natural fibers. One of the things is I've done a little bit of research seeing how acrylic and man-made fibers can, as you use them and wash them, they put off microfibers, which are bad for the environment, bad for the water, bad for aquatic life, especially. So I was like, I'm going to do, it may not be a huge impact, but I'm going to do my little part to reduce that. So I started moving to wool and cotton and other natural fibers. And so my way of doing that is, wow, indie dyed fibers, which are, indie dyed wool, which is gorgeous, is outside of my price range currently. Right. But bare yarn, you can get like for $5 a skein and then make them into what they're doing with food coloring, which again is like really cheap. So that was sort of the impetus to really jump into dyeing yarn for myself. And the more I did it, the more I wanted to do it. It became very addictive. It was very much like knitting. I mean, once you start into it and kind of get that feel of it, you don't want to stop. And that's kind of how dyeing was for me. I wanted to keep doing it. And I started realizing that if I want to keep doing it, it gets expensive after a while. And so I decided, let it pay for itself. Sell some of it, keep some of it if I like it and want it. So that's that was the impetus of finally jumping in and saying, you know what, I'm going to open my store. Right. And I'm going to start dyeing yarn and letting people buy it if they like it.
So when you first opened the store, did you have like the whole marketing plan? Did you have like how you're going to advertise it, where you're going to did you thought it all through?
No, there was no forethought. It was kind of like, all right, I've seen a couple of folks, that have gotten into dyeing yarn and like they just opened up a little Etsy store and started selling some stuff off. And I thought, I could do that. But then again, I've also seen some of the more professional indie dyers, especially Josh Stein of Blue Fiber Company. And I've been following him for a while, and I see what he does, which is like, he has like a daily almost a daily marketing that he does on Instagram and on Facebook and some other places. And I was like, I could take a little page from that and, throw stuff up on Instagram, let people know that it's out there, start getting a following. But as an actual sit down and think, all right, here's how I'm going to plan this out. Every third day, I'm going to put something else out. No.
Well, so at this point, you did the opening of the store and you threw there this gorgeous collection. And the collection is based on Judaica, basically. So like different prayers, different traditions. And I have two here.
Oh, I know. Thank you so much for buying those.
I love
those. Those are a couple of my favorites.
So I want to talk, so this was the Kiddush. So this is the traditional wine that people drink, raise a Kiddush cup for Shabbat prayer, to invoke Shabbat.
Yes.
And this one, I must tell you, like when I saw the process of how you create this yarn, I was just like, I've never seen anything like that. Like I was totally blown away. So it's called Shema, it's the Jewish prayer.
Kind of an affirmation of faith.
Right. But the way you create it, you write the whole prayer on the
Hmm.
yarn, and
Right.
then it becomes this, and it just like it makes it so special, but such a lengthy process. Like, how did you decide to put so much of yourself into those skeins?
I think all indie dyers put a lot of themselves into what they do, but my my faith journey has been really important to me throughout my life. And I started off as a Southern Baptist Christian, and so now my path has led me towards Judaism. And I, especially during COVID, I was very much bolstered and supported by my faith and my faith journey and my beliefs. And so I guess it was just sort of natural for me that the first yarns I put out, the first sort of collection that I thought of in my mind, it actually started with that kiddush color, that color of wine and the richness of it, that starts every holiday, be it Shabbat, which is weekly, or during the high holidays that we're currently in. That is sort of a centralized aspect of how people celebrate their faith. It's a home-based thing. It's a very familial thing to do. And so for me, that kind of then it was like from Kiddush, I went to, I could do a Shema-based thing. And how would I do that? How would I, is like, the sort of the black and white words of Torah, but then you paint it on and you see the words, but then as you incorporate those words into your life, they get broken out and they come apart into your life, and then you knit them back together in a different way and a new pattern comes out of it. So I was like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. I have to do this. This is just so cool. So I just kind of what was going through my mind.
I'm so glad you like filmed yourself doing that, because I felt like it was such a special thing to see, because lots of times like like we see the yarn that dyers sell, but we don't know like the process that it goes through. We don't see the work behind the scenes. And I think like seeing that was like really eye-opening for me, like the amount of labor, the amount of love, the amount of thought that went into like each skein was like really mind blowing for
Right.
me, you know.
Well, and I don't know how, I know a few other indie dyers, but I've never actually sat down and talked to them about, what's your process? How, what are your thought process? What do you think about, sharing your processes?
Right.
And what happens in my mind is I think that they're probably, trade secrets. I don't want to put those out there because other people will mimic me. It's like, yeah, but can they get what you get?
Right.
Like they're going to have something entirely different. To me, I kind of equate it to, my being able to share my process. Someone else could easily buy bare yarn, make a blank out of it, and then paint the Shema on it.
Right.
Great, go for it, do it. But that colorway will be your colorway. It won't be mine.
Right.
It won't be my specific black. It might be not how I have written those, write those words.
Right.
And maybe you'll use a completely different prayer and it'll have a similar effect, but the meaning, the memory, and the intent behind it will be yours. So there are some of those that I will have no problem sharing that information out there. And if you want to recreate it, go for it.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So you mentioned the trade secrets. When you were learning, when you were like trying to improve your skills, right? Going from that first Kool-Aid experience to
Mm-hmm.
Shema, um, was it hard to find information? Was it like hard to find the tutorials or some instructions? Was it all like sort of recreating the wheel?
Um, Actually, on YouTube, there are a lot of folks out there who share their process. They may not share the exact formulation of how they put their colors together, or is like if they do premixes or if they do buy the dye in a premixed fashion, or do they figure out all those things on their own? But they'll show how they do it, what their process is. what some of my favorites are, of course, Rebecca Brown with ChemKnits tutorials. She is a wealth of information. She goes through tons of different techniques and styles and plays around. And I'm like, wow, that is so cool because she just shares so much information.
Right.
There are others out there that do something similar. Shirsty Cat, who is an indie dyer, she puts out a lot of Instagram tutorial, or not tutorials, but Instagram videos of her dyeing. And I'm just like, I could watch those all day long. They're just fascinating to see her dump color on top of yarn and then watch the reveal of it. It's like, how did that happen? It's like, it would, to me, it was like, it could have been a muddy mess, but the way the yarn sits and the way where the dye is and the amount of acid you use changes how quickly colors strike. And then it comes out being something absolutely amazing. And I find that there's a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of dyers out there that do share their information, that do share their techniques and styles, but they may not share their particular colors. And so could I recreate that exact colorway? Probably not, because I don't know what they're using.
Well, being an educator by profession,
Yeah.
do you feel like, did you ever had an urge to like take classes and like learn formally?
I would love to take classes with a professional indie dyer. I think that would be great. It's just the time at which I have come into this does not lend very well to
Right.
that. There's not a lot of, actually, Wichita, Kansas has actually quite a few indie dyers in the area, but we haven't gotten to the point where we sort of get together and dye together, which I think would be kind of a cool thing to do.
Right.
But yeah, part of one of my desires would be to sort of apprentice for a while with a really outstanding professional dyer, not to steal their secrets,
Right.
but to hone my own abilities and craft.
Right. Well, let's talk about your knitting for a bit. So
Okay.
you started with that actually. Knitting came before the yarn dyeing.
Oh yeah.
So you're sitting home one day, winter, and
Yeah.
you think, why not learn how to knit? How did that idea came to mind? Like, why knitting? Why do you think it was knitting and not, I don't know, anything else?
At that time, I was doing a lot of online, or a lot of gaming. I had my Xbox, and so I did a lot of games on Xbox. And part of me felt really guilty for spending all that time with nothing to show for it in the end, other than relaxation and maybe some decompression, which are great. But part of me was like, but what's come of it?
Right.
So it was like, okay, what could I do that would keep me, sort of keep me somewhat busy, but would have a product, something at the end that I could show for it. And I don't know, something came to my mind, is like, learn to knit. I come from a family that was not particularly crafty. My mother used to sew, especially when I was younger. I believe my sister used to knit, and my grandmother on my mother's side was a quilter, and my grandmother on my dad's side did crochet. But I don't know why knitting came to mind. So I don't know, it just did. I went out and was like, fine. And so I went out to a fabric store that just happened to have yarn, picked up a Lions brand Learn to Knit kit, had great big chunky needles and chunky yarn and a pattern. And from the point that I got like several rows in, I became immediately fascinated of taking a string and turning it into a garment. Was it gorgeous? Was it perfect and pretty? It wasn't bad, but it was good enough that I was like hooked, and I then immediately went on to something else.
So what was your journey as far as knitting goes? Like, you started with a scarf, I assume.
Yep, started with it was just a basic scarf. So did lots of scarves. then I moved into doing like dishcloths. I went through a period where I just like made mounds of dishcloths out of cotton yarn. Then about the time that of my marriage to my partner, I decided I was going to knit my future mother-in-law a shawl for the wedding, and also one for my sister who was standing in for my late mother. And I started doing lace, lace triangular shawls and lace stoles. And that kind of then pushed me into an entirely different path for a long time, where I just knitted lace shawls like crazy.
Do you, how was your family reacting to your knitting? Were they surprised? Were they supportive?
I would say all of my family has been very supportive of it, because they were the recipients of most of,
Right.
of the work. Actually, I've never had any pushback from any family or friends. Some of them are fascinated by it. Most people don't pay it much attention. But yeah, I've always just been just fascinated by the whole process of it.
Well, I have a lot of people who tell me, like when I interview them, that the reason they opened Instagram was to preserve the sanity of the family and friends from like every knitted item that they were posting. And that was the exact reason why I started my Instagram, because people were like already rolling their eyes, and like the most common comment I was getting was like, either do you ever sleep, or like I wish I had that much free time on my hands, you know. So I was like, okay, like maybe you don't need to see everything I need, let me open a separate account for that. Do you ever get that kind of like you could have, you could go and get a real job, like why do you do that? Like do you get that sort of feedback from family or friends?
Not a lot. I guess early on, I had started a Facebook page for just my knitting, because it's not that people didn't seem interested in it, but I have a tendency to compartmentalize different aspects of my life. So my work is my work, and when I'm at work, I'm 100% at my work. But then when I'm at home, I'm 100% at home. I like on a daily basis, and I've always been this way, I turn my computer off, and it's my work computer. I don't open it again until the next day.
Right.
So I don't get messages from work saying, hey, come do this, or hey, come do that. So my focus entirely, I've tried very hard throughout my adult life to start learning how to be present with wherever I'm at. And so I kind of have done that also with my crafts. I sort of compartmentalize them, where normal Facebook is for my family and friends. Then I have a page that's devoted just to my knitting, and now I have a page that's devoted just to my dyeing. I have the same thing on my Instagram. I have 3 different Instagram accounts: one for family and friends, one for my knitting, and one for my dyeing.
Well, I must ask you something. So you mentioned one time that you were educated in music, and at some point you did some conducting, studied conducting.
Yes, I did start that.
And to me, being a conductor is probably like the most difficult profession in musical field, like the way I perceive it. And the reason is you have to be like a second head of the entire orchestra. You have to let them know what's coming and when they're gonna come into the music. So it's not following the notes, it's being ahead of everybody and telling them how to do it and telling them when to do it. Do you think those skills, those conducting skills, help you deal with all your life and like all different hobbies and like all these things, you know?
They probably do. I mean, I didn't go too far down the conducting route, although there was a point in my life where that was very much what I wanted to do. But that idea of always sort of kind of being that one beat ahead of sort of of where your life is at is, I don't know, kind of maybe a goal that I've always tried to strive for is kind of being ready for what's coming next before it comes. And yeah, I have other ways that I have sort of connected my music world and my crafting world now. But yeah, I never really thought about how sort of that drive to be a conductor had kind of puts you that one beat ahead, and that desire to constantly be preparing your life for whatever that next thing is.
Right. Well, I must ask you about the guy behind you. Why? Every time you post a picture of the shawl, he's your go-to model.
Yep.
Why him?
It's well, okay. I do not remember when I got him. I got my Spock model. I don't know, but it have to have been almost like 6 years ago. And I think it was in a thrift store, and they were friends of ours, and they were like, "Oh, hey, do you like that?" I was like, "Yeah, I love Star Trek." And they were like, "Here, take that." I was like, okay. It's like, I wouldn't part for this with him for all the money in the world. But then I started realizing, it's like, I kept taking pictures of my shawl, out around my house. It's like on a brick wall, on a fence, up in a tree. I'm like, trees don't wear shawls. I was like, but I don't want to be my own model. So I was like, oh my God, I have that Spock cutout character, so I was like, perfect, I'll put it on him. And then it kind of started there. And then when I started posting those types of pictures, people would often very much react to Spock, and they'd be like, oh, that's so funny and that's so cool. But then we're like, oh my gosh, that shawl is really pretty.
Well, do you wear your own shawls?
I do more now than I used to. Early on, I didn't really make a lot of shawls for me. It was always intended for gifts, because a lot of them were lace, and of course, men in today's society aren't expected to wear lace, even though that's where it all started. Right. But I don't know, more and more, I'm like, no one cares, and if they do, then maybe I've pushed some buttons for them, and that's great.
Right. So you're gonna do the Mystery Knit Along of Steven West, right?
Yep, I sure am.
And you decided to dye your own kit for that.
Yep, I did make that decision, and I followed through with it. It took me a while.
Do you so when something like this comes along, is your first impulse to buy the ready kit or make it yourself?
I'd have to say my first impulse is make it myself.
And did you have immediately, you saw Steven West showing all the yarn, did you immediately have colors in mind? Do you think in terms of kits yourself?
I did not immediately have colors in mind, but I knew we have entered my favorite time of year, which is the fall and winter. I'm very much a fall and winter person. I was, my birthday falls in October, so I'm very much about that time of year. And so I wanted sort of those somewhat muted but vibrant colors that represent fall. And the thing that really struck me about his instruction, and my God, that man has great information and to teach people not only how to knit, but how to prepare to knit, how to choose your yarn and your colors. And so I loved his videos. And so from that, I started saying, all right, what dyes do I have that I can, sort of tweak the colors a little bit to keep them in a fall palette. And I think I really came up with something that's really cool. All right, so here's the light, here's my medium, and here's my dark. So it's a sort of a sandy brown. I don't know if that comes across. Then a sort of a light, sort of a medium based plum color, and then this really rich, dark reddish brown. And then my color pops are this gold
Oh,
and this dark purple.
I love that.
And so I just think these really, they really play nicely together. And I think they're going to be, whatever he does with his pattern, I think these are going to look nice with it.
Right. No, that's gonna be gorgeous. I can't wait to see what you're gonna make. I'm actually like, do you like the idea of mystery knit-alongs?
Actually, I do like that idea of not knowing what's coming next. There are a lot of people out there, they get a pattern and they'll read through the pattern, you know, and find out exactly what's coming up, what techniques do I have to know how to do. And I don't. I look at a picture, I see a couple, you know, and then I'll research it. What have a couple other people done? What colors have they used? And then I just jump in. It's
Right.
like, all right, how do you cast on? Cast on. All right, here we go. It's like, oh, new technique. Not sure how to do that. YouTube. How do I do this technique?
Right. It's funny because like I don't love mystery knit-alongs for one simple reason. I feel like it's too slow for me. Like I want to be like, I don't want anything to hold me. I don't want to wait for the next clue. So I actually cheat myself, cheat the system by waiting until all the clues are
All
out.
the clues are out, then you
And
just
then I go through it. So I don't mind the mystery part. I actually enjoy that. And I actually like, I pretty much never look at the pattern. I'm just like, I'm taking one row at a time.
Mhm.
And that sort of comes from like I've done a lot of test knitting, so that's sort of like the habit of the test knitting. I just go through it because I find all the mistakes that way much faster, like if I don't know what to expect. So I just like literally go row by row. So but that's like I was trying one time, I was doing, it was like right before Rhinebeck in 2019. I can't even remember which shawl it was, but it was also Mystery Knit Along of Stephen West. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna make it. And then I got the first clue, and then it took like a week and something for the second clue. And I was like, okay, I can't do that. I'm just gonna wait until all the clues are out, and then I'm gonna do it. Because I was done in like 2 days with the first clue, and then I'm like, okay, what am I gonna supposed to do now? Like, well, do you need a lot of multiple projects at the same time, or is it like, are you one project kind of guy?
I started off very much what I would call a product knitter. I was, you know, one product at a time, knit to get the product, then find a new product, you know, a new pattern, cast that, you know, just very regimented, one project at a time. I don't know what happened, but I've noticed over the past couple of years, I have very much shifted from a product knitter to a process knitter. I'm very much just about knitting. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if I have to rip back a couple of rows to fix a mistake. That's fine. It just means more knitting. Uh, I somewhere that shift has happened. I still desire the product at the end, but I don't mind the process to get there. So I've gotten to the point now where I usually have a sock, a shawl, and maybe another project on the needles all at the same time. And it just depends on my mood of that period of time as to which one gets the most attention.
Right. Well,
right now I have a pair of socks that has been languishing for a month.
well, I wanted to ask you about that sock because I've heard in your last episode that it was there since July.
I know it's still there. I haven't touched it since.
I was wondering,
like a month. And I was like, I started my year so strong. I had a goal of one pair of socks every month, and I was great up until summer. And then I was like, well, one thing is I changed my pattern up. I was doing like on 64 stitches, and then I was like, you know, that's just not the perfect comfort yet. All right, I'm gonna bump that up, and I bumped it up to 72, and then all of a sudden the sock takes so much longer to knit.
right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, so it's not going to be a pair of socks every month. In fact, right now it's not even a sock every month.
Or not even every other month. Since
We're not even every other month at this point. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
do you ever get like stressed over it? Like, does that sock look accusingly at you ever?
I wouldn't say I get stressed over it. I get to the point where I'm like, I really should go finish that, at least that sock, and cast on the other one so I can have that progress. And actually, quite frankly, having the podcast goads me more than just anything else. Is because it's like podcast days come along and you don't have anything to show for it. So it's like, let me cast something on, make some movement here.
Right. Do people call you accountable, like, and do what I just did, and like what happened to that sock since last episode?
Not a lot. I'm probably more accountable to myself. I'm more sort of rough on myself in that fashion of saying, wow, it's like, you haven't done anything on that for a while. It's like, for that matter, actually, now that it's we've hit fall, although the weather doesn't reflect it quite yet. I have a sweater and a blanket that I had cast on in the winter. And then when the summer months hit, I was like, I'm just not in the mood for these big bulky items. Right. So they're starting to call for me from the corner there saying, hello, it's fall now. You said you were coming, come back to us.
Right. Do you find that now that you got into the indie dyeing, you have less time for knitting and it's harder to balance between the two?
I do not find it hard to balance those two. What has gotten in the way is actually having a full-time job. I got real comfortable during COVID being able to sit, do a few job interviews and then go back and knit like mad, or do a couple of dye projects. And that's how my day was filled, was housework, interviewing, and doing some crafts. And now that I have a full-time job that keeps me busy at least 8 hours a day, if not a little bit longer, I'm like, I want to knit, I want to dye, that, and I also cook for the household. So it's like I have all these things that I have to get done. So yeah, maybe there is a little bit of balance issue, at least in my mind, but I don't berate myself too much about it.
So when you started YouTube, and I know I'm jumping a little bit, but they all related in a sense.
Oh yeah, they're all related.
It's all you, When you started YouTube, it was also during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So you had an idea of starting podcast, you were on schedule, you had an idea of how you're going to break your podcast into like what you're working on, what you're planning, what the ideas, the finished objects, and all this stuff. And then you went back to work.
Yes.
So now you have, as you said, knitting, cooking, dyeing, and you have YouTube. What takes priority?
Again, it depends on where I'm at the time. So, for me, like 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 or about 5 o'clock at night, I'm focused primarily on work. So when I have breaks, I'm like, all right, what's dinner going to be? What am I going to set out to thaw for dinner? And what am I going to cook? But primarily, I try to keep focused on what I'm doing and where I'm at. So I do try to keep to a upload schedule of every other week, although sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Either I don't feel I have anything to say, and so I'm like, I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm not going to just go online and just sit there in front of people.
Right.
So sometimes it's 3 weeks, and I'm like, that's okay. People who are interested will be there.
Do you find it difficult to like decide what you're going to be talking about? Like in general, like you sitting, because to me, it sounds very difficult. Like to me, what we're doing right now is much easier than what you do on your channel, because we have each other, right? We chat.
Oh, exactly. I love those podcasts where there's a couple, because they can feed off each other, and things become a little bit more interesting due to the interplay of how they communicate with each other, as well as how they communicate with their audience. I think individual podcasters do have a little bit of an additional challenge of how do I create that feeling of communication between myself and my audience. What do they want to know? Well, they can't tell me. I just have to make an imagining of what they might want to know.
Well, I want to ask our audience a question actually, because what I'm thinking, like I was trying I did the giveaway on YouTube.
Mhm.
And so I was trying to film myself announcing the giveaway, right? Very straightforward. I mean, there is nothing to it. It was 3 minutes video. It took me, I think, 16 tries.
Oh, right.
At the end of it, like I was exhausted beyond belief. It was like the most difficult thing I ever done, and it wasn't great, right? So for me, it's much easier to talk to you. But then I feel like when you and I are talking, the audience sort of just listens. They outside of our conversation. Like, do you guys feel left out when Scott and I are talking? Or do you feel like you're part of the audience when it's only Scott talks to you? Like, I wonder how it's like, how the audience actually finds it. Like, I had a lot of feedback when people were telling me that they love my channel because they feel like a fly on the wall listening to two friends chatting. But I wonder, like, what's more intimate for the audience, if it's like one person talks to them or if it's conversation between the two people.
That'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting study to know, is like what type of podcast you prefer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you guys can put it in the comments. So
yeah. Let us know in the comments. Maybe we'll come back and do this again. In fact, I would love that.
Right. So do you have any like big plans for your dyeing company? Do you already like think what's going to happen for the holiday season, or like what you're going to do next year, how you're going to expand, or is it all sort of figure as you go?
I have ideas. I don't, I would not call myself a business planner yet. Like I've barely been in business a month and a half. And for those of you out there who have purchased any of my yarn, all I can say is thank you so very much.
And it's so soft. You guys will love it. Like seriously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. These are some really nice bases. But yeah, thank you guys for giving it a try. I hope you're enjoying it. Come back again. But in terms of future, I mean, I have little ideas that have come up in my mind, like, my birthday's coming up. Do I want to do a special birthday colorway and put that out there? Part of me is thinking yes. When the Mystery Knit Along came out, I had decided like last year when I saw everybody doing the slip stravaganza, I was like, man, I wish I had gotten in on that, because that looked like so much fun. Right. But I was like, I knew at that point, the next time he comes up with his Mystery Knit Along, I'm jumping in. I don't care what it is. I'm going to try it. And then when it came out, I was like, oh, I think I want to dye my own yarn and give that a try and see how that works out. And then, of course, in the back of my mind is, if you have spent all that energy putting together a group of colors that you like, are you going to put those in your shop? And so I was like, yeah, I guess I am. So go out to my shop, you'll see those there. So I've thrown all those colors out there individually, as well as I have right now a couple of sets that you can order, and I'll dye those up and send those out. But yeah, so it was like, I spent all this energy getting these colors where I wanted them. Might as well make use of having done that and make them available to others that might like it. So there's that. I have ideas, probably not this year, because it's really too late in the year to be doing it, but of doing sort of an Advent calendar, but doing it around Hanukkah, similar to what ChemKnits Tutorials does. She does a Hanukkah Advent calendar. So I've been thinking of doing that, but I've also been thinking of doing a Passover calendar.
That might be interesting, actually.
Yeah, which could be interesting, is like, is like maybe the 10 plagues in yarn form.
What's gonna plague your yarn stash?
Exactly. Let me plague your yarn stash with frogs and lice and locusts and blood.
Do you have a large yarn stash yourself?
Not particularly large, not in comparison to what I've seen some people out there have, where they have like tubs and tubs. You know, I am nowhere like near the Smells Like Yarn.
Well, I don't think many people are.
Um, I don't know. It's a moderately sized. I'm getting to the point where I am almost comfortable with where I'm at with most of the yarn that I have. But of course, I'm always willing to buy more.
Right. Do you find that you, like, as you became more serious dyer, that you discovered some bases that you don't like, some bases that you absolutely love? Like, was that the process also?
A little bit. The first supplier that I used, I loved their bases. They all felt amazing. Um, but with the shipping issues with COVID, their ability to maintain product that was available was dramatically curtailed. So I moved from them to some other suppliers that are a bit more consistent. And so far, those bases have been really good. There was one supplier that I tried their yarn, and it was like, this is merino? It feels very rough.
Right.
And so I was like, you know, when I dyed it, I was like, did I do something wrong? Because it just didn't feel like what I was used to. And then, of course, I did a little bit of research and found out, you know, the micron level of that particular base was different from other types of bases that are also merino. I was like, oh, well, there it is. That's what caused that feeling of more toothiness that I'm used to on merino.
Is there some sort of base that you've never worked with, but you're dying to work with?
I do want to work with more silk blended bases. I did get a sort of a test mini that was like a 70% merino, 30% silk, and I played around with it. And the way that base sort of just shimmers with the color, I was just like, oh my God, that is just so cool. I want to do more of that.
Mm.
So yeah, there might be some silk bases. I also think I also want to do play with some alpaca, some suri, just to kind of see what that's like. I know that at least from some of the YouTube watching that the process and what the amount of time it takes for dye to successfully adhere to some of those other fibers is sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, based on the different types of protein fiber that you're working with. But yeah, I'd love to do more silk blends.
Well, I can't wait to see what you're coming up with next. So I'll be
It'll be a surprise
there
for all
watching
of
your
us.
progress. Yeah. Well, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I really love talking to you and getting to know you a little bit better. And best of luck with your store and your YouTube and everything you do.
Oh,
I'm
well,
gonna
thank
be
you so
watching.
much, Irina. It has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And for anyone out there who thinks that, oh, she'd never interview me, well, that was me. And yes, she will. She has been very, very gracious to open up her platform to a lot of different types of people, be they seasoned in the fibercraft world or just getting into it. So Irina, thank you so much for shining a light on a lot of us that may not ever have had that light shined on us. We so appreciate
pleasure. And I'm sure you have a lot to shine on. So like I
well,
disagree with that, And I find like the, people who tell me that but I'm nobody. Like, why would you interview me? I find those people usually most interesting conversations. So, you know,
yeah.
I'm glad you agreed.
Oh, I totally agree. I love your channel and I can't wait to see who else you're going to interview.
Thank you. Thank you.